what Buddha realized, what Jesus Christ realized, what Ramana Maharshi realized, what Neem Karoli Baba realized, what holy men throughout time have realized, is nothing other than this event that is happening right here, right now, as it actually is. And once you realize what this is, you get to participate in it as it is, which is called variously spiritual realization, liberation, so on and so forth. You realize that you are divinity, nothing other than divinity exists, not as an abstract notion or as a philosophy or as something to aspire to, but as a concrete fact. The only thing that can prevent you from realizing this and participating in this glory is your misunderstanding of it. If you have fantasies or imaginations of what you think it is that you take to be true, then that will block you effectively from appreciating the astounding nature of what you are, of what this is. Nothing other than that needs to change, nothing needs to be transformed, nothing needs to be developed. You simply have to notice what this is. You have to discover what this is in order to participate in the glory of it. And as I said, the only problem, the only impediment whatsoever is imagination. And not imagination in itself, but the confusing imagination for reality. In other words, confusing your fantasies for what is actually the case. And doing so will effectively put a cork in the bottle, shut the genie in the bottle. It will shut magic out of your world. It will shut divinity out of your world. It will shut spontaneity and vitality out of your world. And you will tend to live in a world of suffering, smallness, pain, limitation, and ultimately death. Whereas when you learn to distinguish between fantasy and actuality, you don't even need to stop fantasizing. Imagination is fine in its own place. The only problem is not being able to discriminate between fantasy and reality, between imagination and reality. When you learn to do that, you get to appreciate what this is, you get to participate in it as it is, you get to discover that you and this is an astounding, inconceivable, transcendental event that is beyond wonderful, intrinsically, and has no problematic aspects, has no problems to be solved, has no impediments, has no limitations whatsoever, will never end, has never begun. It is eternal, and it is absolutely beyond spectacular. That's the sales pitch. So, what does imagination look like? What does this imagination that causes such a dire problem consist of? It consists of thinking you know what anything is whatsoever. If you have a description for anything whatsoever that you think is more or less true, that's a sure symptom of fantasy, of imagination. If you have a name for some condition or object or some circumstance whatsoever that you think more or less accurately applies to the circumstance, this is a symptom of fantasy or imagination. Reality, as it actually is absolutely undescribable. It is absolutely unimaginable. So, as soon as you imagine it, as soon as you describe it, as soon as you define it, by definition, you are using your imagination to do so. You are taking something absolutely inconceivable and rounding it off and averaging it out to a limited concept that you can wrap your mind around, and then you're defining this inconceivability as being the limited condition that you are holding in your imagination and naming. All of which is fine until you take the extra step of thinking that that is actually true. This is a world. I am a human being. This is life. This is a microphone. If I actually think any of those things are true in any kind of a powerful sense at all, it's a sure sign that I am in delusion, I am in imagination, I am in fantasy, and I am not, by virtue of that fact, I am essentially blocking myself from appreciating the open-endedness and infinite dimensionality that reality actually consists of. Now, I'm using this word reality, which may sound very abstract and absolute and refined, and it is actually absolute, but it's not abstract. By reality, what I mean, it turns out, is very close to what we mean by the word experience. Your experience is infinite dimensional. It is open-ended. It is indescribable. It is inconceivable. No way you can get a handle on any aspect of it whatsoever. And as I said, as soon as you think you have, or even, typically we don't notice it, we just assume we have, simply by thinking something is something, then that's a sure sign that we have cut ourselves off from noticing the spectacular, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful nature of this actual event, and shut ourselves into a world of limitation, a world of smallness, a world of problems, a world of suffering, a world of frustration, and a world of limitation. And by doing so, we reap the reward of a life of essentially hell. We put ourselves into a living hell, where we suffer, we're in problems we can't find solutions to, and we're going to get old and sick and die. End of story. And none of that is actually true. But you can't avail yourself of that fact, that delightful fact, unless you can see it. And you can't see it as long as you confuse fantasy with reality, as long as you insist on defining things, describing things, and thinking that those descriptions and definitions actually apply. So it's actually a very, very simple state of affairs. What makes it complicated, of course, is that we typically do all of this defining and describing and believing on an unconscious level, so we don't know we're doing it. We don't notice we're doing it. We typically think that things are the way we think they are, and we think we're more or less right, I am a human being. This is Berkeley. This is a world. This is Wednesday. Blah, 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 blah. All these various things. And instead of realizing that these are just designations of inconceivability, of absolute infinite dimensionality, if I think they refer to anything that is in any sense finite or static or concrete or inert, I am cheating myself of my birthright. I am cheating myself of my own wealth, of my own bottomless fountain of vitality, of fulfillment, of creativity, of inspiration. So that's pretty much the whole shooting match.
There's a little place in there which my experience differs, which is identifying and then knowing. I find that I identify and then I know, rather than identifying is a mistake. It's for me. It's a doorway to knowing. Does that make sense?
I guess I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to by identifying and knowing.
When I look at this camera, I see a camera, and once I see it as a camera in my head, then I realize that it is the infinite, that the camera does not describe what I'm looking at, but the actual identification of the camera is what makes that come into reality for me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So it's not looking at that and immediately knowing it's...
So if you didn't know it was a camera, you know, if I had some Martian artifact that I held up, you just would look at it and go, you know, would you not see it as infinite dimensional? In other words, is that a necessary step?
I would see it as infinitely dimensional, just as I see the camera as infinitely dimensional, but when you hold it up, my first reaction, I don't know if it's even a reaction,
right?
But my first impulse is to identify.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we have this intrinsic mentality that has the capability of discriminating astounding range of sensibilities within its experience, right? So you can tell a camera from a piece of wood, from a pile of dog shit. You know, you can tell this without any effort whatsoever. And this is just the operation of an intrinsic functionality that is just here. It comes with. But if you stop there, that's falling into belief. If you stop with, oh, it's a camera, and then, God, it's so boring, let me go on this, let me find something interesting. But if you can, in other words, identifying it as a camera is not the problem. You know, identifying, using discriminating intelligence to sort impressions is not a problem. The problem is if you then believe that sorting has plumbed the depths, rather than just scratched the surface. That's the real turning point. That's the fulcrum.
I agree with that 100%, but it's when I look at that Martian artifact, whatever it is, there's still an impulse in my body, the corporal me, that wants to identify.
Sure.
And once I've either identified or not identified, immediately I'm aware that it is part of the infinite.
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, sure. But again, these are not opposites. They coexist because the infinite dimensionality, the open-endedness, is intrinsically what experience is, and this identifying faculty intrinsically is just available. It spontaneously functions. You know, it takes an astounding degree of mental restraint and training to look at something and not categorize it mentally. But the turning point is that this categorization does not need to be the end of the line. This categorization does not necessarily stop or inhibit in any way the perception of what this actually is, the perception of the open-endedness. It's this mechanism of believing that your categorization is final. It's believing that you have because these categorizations are always provisional, they're always limited, they're always partial, they're always within a context. And the infinite dimensionality by its very nature is not. It's completely outside any context. So, you know, it's like any identification is so this chair is a chair. I can see that it's a chair, and I can identify that I would use it as a chair, and I would gladly sit in it. Hopefully the leg won't fall off, and so on and so forth. But I don't think that's what it is. That it is that is all that it is. It's like it's a chair and so much more. You know, it's like never-ending moreness. There's never-ending moreness that is there than can be included in any categorization. And that's the fact that's important to see. If we settle for our categorization and then stop, oh, it's a chair, and then it ceases to be of interest, it ceases to have anything other than its chairness that I have recognized be there for me, then I have shut the door on its dimensionality. I have shut the door on its vastness, and in so doing I shut the door on my own vastness, and I shut the door on all vastness, because that very mechanism closes down infinity, closes down indeterminacy, and I enter a world of finite, limited objects and circumstances that they're inert, they're boring, they have a limit, they're here and they're going to be broken and gone, and I make everything very small and very dull and dead. Generally, unbeknownst to myself, generally this mechanism, it's not like we do this intentionally, but we don't know that we're doing it, and we may not notice that we have an alternative, we have an option, and that's really what we're talking about here, is that there is an option to notice that experience, any experience, all experience, is intrinsically infinite dimensional, which means that there is no limit to the ways and qualities with which you can experience any experience. So, here's a teacup. So how many ways can I experience this teacup? Well, I can't say. I could spend the rest of my life experiencing this teacup, and I wouldn't have started scratching the surface. And you may say, well, that's trivial. But actually it's not. Actually it's profound. So, because the notion of any teacup that has a limit, that has an end to it, oh, it's just a teacup, that just implies that it's a teacup and there's an end to it. I've reached a limit, I've reached a wall, I've reached as far as it can go. And how far can I go with this teacup? Well, there's absolutely no limit to how far I can go. And this applies not just to teacups, of course, but to any aspect of experience. And interestingly, or most obviously, it applies to myself. It applies to mentality. It applies to experience itself. It applies to consciousness. And it turns out that these issues are one and the same as the issue as what the teacup is. So what the open-endedness of the teacup is one and the same as the open-endedness of my being, of my consciousness, of this field of experience.
It seems to me that it's like two railway tracks running in the same direction. One has a train of belief in it, and the other one has a train of this. Mm-hmm. And this train is not actually a train at all, but the belief train really is a train. I mean, it goes, and I keep on believing one thing after another after another. Yeah. I know they're not true, but at the same time, there's always this counter track that has the awareness.
Yeah, because this open-endedness, this actual condition, is not the opposite of the world that we think we know, and the world we can name, and the world we can distinguish. That world is simply the surface, call it, or the very superficial aspects of this vast depth, this vast openness that is also included here. So it's not like it's an either-or situation. The specifics are what they are, but they are just scratching the surface. I mean, not even that in context. They are just a tiny, 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 infinitesimal piece of absolute vastness that is available. And it's not, they're not mutually exclusive. It's not like there's specifics and details and definitions or this open-endedness. These things coexist. So, in other words, all the facts and figures that we all know, my name is Peter Brown, I do live in the San Francisco Bay Area, this is the planet Earth, this is the Milky Way galaxy as humans designate it, blah, blah, blah. All that is not untrue, but it's it's also not true by the fact of what is actually happening here. The vast majority of it is not included in any of those statements. It's not acknowledged. And so if I acknowledge those things and I don't simultaneously acknowledge that there's infinitely more always in any statement, I'm liable to be hypnotizing myself into thinking, well, that's it. Oh, this is Earth. I am Peter Brown. This is the solar system. And then I've created limited, finite things in my imagination where there are none. There are none.
For me, that second track really isn't the objects. It's just belief. I mean, I identify objects and I say, this is an egg, this is a fireplace, this is whatever. But it's just belief, and I know that it's just belief. It's something that I bring to the table, and
it's not true.
It's not true.
It's not final.
It's quite useful.
Sure.
But it's not true. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not ultimately the true context, the true picture.
The mind races to identify a name. If we notice the phenomena and the experience...
I'm sorry, would you start over again a little louder, please?
Yeah. The mind races to identify a name. If we notice the phenomenon and the experience of identifying, doesn't the identification become weaker?
Well, maybe, but that's not the most efficient, powerful way to do it. What I would recommend is, by all means notice the identifying mechanism, but it's much simpler and easier to go to the phenomena itself and notice how slippery it is, how open-ended it is, how multidimensional it is. And in the face of that, your tendency to name it and designate it and define it will become laughable as being complete. Whereas if you sort of deconstruct the naming mechanism and deconstruct mind and deconstruct the identifying mechanism and all of that, you're still, that just seems a lot more difficult to me. But, it doesn't really matter. The fact is that the big picture is right here, right now. It is available. So why not just jump to that? It's like going to the last page of the book and find out who done it. You go to the last page of your math book and you see what all the answers are, because it's all right here. And if you do that, then in retrospect, you can look back on identification. You can look back on personality. You can look back on all of those things, and they become perfectly clear and obvious what they are, without the effort of having to deconstruct them and wade through them and trying to sort them out. In other words, zoom out, so to speak, to see the big picture, and then you'll have the actual context. And once you have the context, then all of the details fit themselves in. They just become self-evident, without needing to wade through them serially, a step at a time, and sort them all out. It's like, I don't know, if you ever played with Google Earth is great fun, and it illustrates this principle very well. If you're zoomed in on the Bay Area and you're interested in how to get to New York, you can, when you're zoomed in on the Bay Area, you can sort of squidge over and be looking at Sacramento, and then squidge over and trying to follow 80 along, and you can squidge over and then you're somewhere in Nevada. Or you can just zoom out and bang, there's New York, there's the Bay Area, there's the whole thing, and you can see what it is, and then you can zoom into any portion of it and get the details, but you've already got the whole context in one piece in your hand, so to speak, without needing to sort of construct it piecemeal, piece at a time. Which is again is basically what I'm recommending, is we can access the open-endedness of our experience effortlessly in the moment. You don't need to work up to it or plan for it or develop talents or, spend 20 years in meditation or get a series of initiations or something. Just at this moment, notice how your experience is vast. I mean, it's self-evident. This is a no-brainer. This is not something that is, if you can't notice your experience is vaster than you can describe, then you're just not looking very hard. And you don't have to look very hard to notice that fact. You don't need to notice what it is. Just notice that is the case, that, oh my God, this is really fast. I mean, I can talk about a lot of things, like, for example, that are in my field of vision, or that I happen to be thinking about, or that I happen to be feeling, but there's a whole lot of it that I can't talk about. There's no words for it. This particular feeling that I'm feeling in my forearm, there's no words for it. It's just a vibe. It's a flavor. But it is an experience. It is there. It is subtle. And how many of those kinds of subtle experiences are present in your experience in real time? And the answer is as many as you care to look for. Period. I mean, literally. You want to find a billion, there's a billion. You want to find a gazillion, there's a gazillion, I mean, counting becomes laughable because these things, of course, aren't discrete. But experience is very obviously open-ended. Experience is very obviously incredibly subtle. And not subtle in an abstract way, subtle in a sense of indescribable, nuanced, textured. We don't have, there's 10,000 words or whatever in the dictionary, and there's more than 10,000 things in your experience. So what are you going to do? You're going to need to start doubling up, and then, using the same word for 1,000 things. How can you differentiate those 1,000 things? And they're all different from each other. So you can notice this fact instantly in real time, without any preparation, without any effort, without any ramping yourself up to it or educating yourself to it. And then in that context of this actual present astoundingness, just your experience as it is right now, then you can look at naming things. You can look at psychology. You can look at human beings. You can look at environment. You can look at all these kinds of imputed entities, imputed conditions, imputed qualities, and see them in that context as they are, as basically arguments, that are each founded upon a small data set that we abstract out of our experience. Oh, I have a certain range of experience that I'll call physical sensation, so maybe I have a body. I have a certain range of experiences that seem to be sort of surrounding me in some sense so I'll call it a room, and so on and so forth. But the actuality of my experience in real time transcends these delimitations simply by including more than them, simply by overflowing, by being vaster, more subtler, different. I mean, this is self-evident, and I think if you look for it, you can discover or notice this self-evidence for yourself, and then see that if that's the actual context, if that's what experience actually is, where do you get off thinking that, calling it all the things you call it, and thinking that it's limited to that? What about all this other stuff that you're not addressing? You become like a fundamentalist political party or something, where you have 10 issues you'll talk about, and someone says, but what about something that's not on the list, and you ignore it and dodge them and wave them down and go back to one of your 10 favorite issues, and that's essentially what we do. When we are buying into our own belief systems, we're like a fundamentalist political party that only will only look at these particular things, But what about what's in between? What about what's not on the list? What about something you can't name? Is there nothing in your experience you don't have a word for? Is there no feeling or sensation that you can't describe? Is there no mental experience or thought or mood or just vibe that there's no way you could say what it is, pin it down? It's self-evident to me that there always is. And so what's up with that? What does that imply? It implies that, wow, there's more going on here than is dreamt of in my spoken philosophy, simply because you don't have the words for it. If for no other reason, it's just the limitation of semantics. It's like trying to describe Leonardo da Vinci with the numbers 1 through 10. It's a mismatch. There's qualities there that just can't be addressed with your available alphabet. And likewise, if you're using words and ideas, it's a very limited palette next to the actual density and subtlety of our actual experience. That's all. And so going to that simple present fact makes all the rest of it obvious. And then you can, in retrospect, you can go back and revisit the details and do the math all you want.
It seems that right at the very beginning of an experience, to label it as mine or to think of it as my experience gets you off on a track that goes on forever, that develops the fantasy.
Well, it might, but mine is compared to what? There's no other than mine, so mine is redundant. Why not just call it this experience instead of my experience?
Well, that's what I mean. If it's just what's happening, then there's the apparent feeling that it's significantly different than experiencing this as someone experiencing it.
Yeah, but the experience isn't different. You're just adding a supposed you that you're holding in your imagination, and then you're adding an additional relationship that this imagined you is somehow having this experience. So it's not that the experience is different, it's that you're adding something to it.
Well, it seems like that is what establishes the fantasy.
It might, but it's the mechanism that does. It's the mechanism of imagining anything. Even if it didn't start with you, when you believe anything to be the case, it sets up the same mechanism. In other words, the starting point is irrelevant. It's the mechanism that matters.
Well, I guess it's a mechanism of concept. It's a mechanism of thinking that it is something.
Precisely. Thinking that it is something and you know what it is.
And that there's somebody there.
But that's not an and. That's just more thinking that there's something and you know what it is. Thinking there's a you and you know what that is. Which, if you look closely, you'll discover that you can't possibly. Okay, so there's a you. Prove it. Define this you. Find the you. Go into your experience and put your finger on you. Draw a circle around you. Define you as opposed to some not you. If you're honest and intelligent, you're going to be stymied. So this you turns out to be an imputation. It turns out to be a claim. It turns out to be essentially a fantasy. Because when you go looking for you, what you find is experience. Because you can't find anything other than experience, because that's what there is. That's the only thing that is present, let's call it experience. So if you go looking for you, you find experience. If you go looking for not you, you find experience. So why distinguish between the one and the other? It's just sophistry. It's just names. It's like calling Canada and the United States. It's like they zoom out. There ain't no moat.
I think I heard you say at the beginning tonight that there was no getting sick and aging and dying, that was not happening.
Correct.
So what is that apparency of those things that we can see I can see around me? What is
Sure.
that?
Well, what it is a very superficial and very partial rendering of a much, much more profound phenomena, which ultimately completely transcends those specifications. In other words, getting sick is getting sick, but it's so much more than that as to render the fact that it's getting sick laughable. Dying is dying, but it's so much more than that it renders it holding that as being just dying as anything you can wrap your head around is an absurdity. And this is not just trivial. This is not just sophistry or philosophy or words. This is the fact that the experience of anything is bottomless, is deep. I mean, you've been sick. Everyone's been sick. You've been sick before, right? So when you're sick, the actual experience of getting sick, yeah, you can say, yeah, I'm sick, but is that all you are? I mean, what is sick? A simple thing, that it looks like a pebble on the table or something? Or is it a whole vast sea of qualities and nuance, most of which you couldn't possibly describe or wrap your head around or have words for? And that each of which fractally leads off to more and more and more, right? I mean, and I don't mean in the abstract. I mean just actually experientially, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're in bed and you have whatever symptoms you have. It's not that that's not true, but that is just scratching the surface of what your actual experience is, which includes so much more than that. And the same thing applies to any condition whatsoever that we can label, So being sick, that applies to that. Being happy, it applies. When you're happy, it's like, oh, I'm happy, okay, fine. Is that all that's going on? What exactly does this mean in your experience? And well, happy turns out to be this vast symphony of flavors and nuances and vibes and poignancy, right? I mean, the experiential reality of it is rich, is thick, is dense, is bottomless, and you can't find an end to it. You can't find it's not like, okay, here's happy and that's where it ends. Happy is not a simple thing any more than sick is a simple thing. Yeah. It's open-ended, it's vast, it's subtle. You can't pin it down. You can't draw a circle around it. You can't find where it begins and ends. You can't define it. And yet we think we can define it. Oh, it's just sick. Oh, it's just happy. It's not that it's not sick, it's not that it's not happy, it's that doesn't define the actual full field of experience that those designations actually refer to.
And because of that, should we not even attempt to bother doing that or making those?
No, it doesn't matter at all. Just notice the actual experience. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's not like you need to stop using words or stop thinking or stop designating things. Just see that these designations are like pointing your finger at something. It's when you name something, it doesn't define you. My name is Peter, but that doesn't mean that I am Peter.
Right.
Peter is just like an address, And the address points to what? To this. What is this? Well, I can't say. You can't say. No one can say what this is, what's here.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so it's fine to call me Peter, but that doesn't define me. That just indicates me. It's fine to call an experience being sick, but that doesn't define it. That just indicates it. Mm-hmm. And this is the difference between insanity and sanity. Insanity is using language as if it was definitive. Sanity is using language as if it was indicative. Language indicates experience. It refers to experience, but it does not define it. Experience will always transcend the implications of what you're using to refer to it, right? You follow that? Whereas if I'm using it definitively, I'm expecting the experience actually is no more than what I'm referring to. You are Dick. This is the Hillside Club. This is a cup. And all of a sudden, in my imagination, there's just this boring little thing that's a cup and no more. There's this strange guy that's Dick and no more. There's this Baroque building that's the Hillside Club and no more. And I'm closing myself off from the incredible density and richness and non-linearity of the actual experience that these things consist of. In other words, experience is like a dream. It's a field. It morphs. It's subtle. It's rich. It doesn't have sharp boundaries. And by using language definitively, we pretend that it does, and we seduce ourselves into living in a world where things are separate and cut off and small and limited. Whereas when we notice that our actual experience is very dreamlike, it's this vast sea, it's a symphony. We never really know exactly what's going on. We never really know what anything is. We're just presented with this richness that you can't really get a handle on. I mean, you can know a lot about it. I mean, you can know that, you can indicate things and designate them and all that. But that doesn't actually shut off the richness that is always present in experience. And if you let it shut it off, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. You're cutting yourself off from your own open-endedness, from your own richness, from your own, ultimately, vitality and creativity and intelligence. Well, no, but by ignoring it, you're not letting yourself deliberately participate in it, and it has that effect, even though it's not actual.
Okay, there's two questions from two different people. I'll start with the first one. Can't you say that experience is me as opposed to my experience? So that me-ness is, I'm paraphrasing.
Sure, you can say experience is me, but there's nothing to be gained by that. Experience is, there's no experience that is not any non-me, so calling it me doesn't add any information. I mean, you can say I am experience. I can say the universe is experience. I can say the world is experience. I can say reality is experience, and those are all the same statement. So why bother to make them at all? Why not just simply say experience? Why qualify that experience when you're not actually qualifying it? I mean, saying experience is me, just say experience is the same informational content.
Same person wants to know, does calling it experience add any information?
No. And experience doesn't define it either. Experience indicates where to look for what we're talking about. When I say reality or something, it sounds very, abstract or heady or, what reality? Oh, great, where do I look for that? But when I say, what I'm referring to by this inclusive, absolute notion is simply what you're used to calling experience. Then that gives you a hint where to look for what we're talking about. But experience is not defined by the notion or the word experience. This is just a way of pointing at this bizarre, astounding circumstance that alone is true, that alone exists.
Okay. The second person wants to know, are you saying, a follow-up on the first one you were just answering.
Okay.
Yet it is intelligent, therefore implies entity, me-ness.
Not necessarily. Why? Maybe intelligence is just intrinsic to reality and is not based on an entity. Maybe the entity is experience itself, and which if that's intrinsically intelligent, why suppose that there has to be a you to be intelligent? Maybe space is intelligent. Maybe the field is intelligent. Maybe, quantum mechanics is intelligent.
I want to put something in from what I'm reading here, is that when the first question came up, can't you say that experience in quotes and me in quotes and then my experience in quotes? And I think, as I'm reading this, that they're saying that somehow or other, even in your explanation, there's a separation of me and experience as my experience, whereas they're saying experience itself is what I'm experiencing as me, or
Sure.
what's being experienced as a me.
Yeah,
Anyway,
experience
that's
is-
my take on what they say.
Sure, yeah.
And now they further say, why not a you, from what you said. It is, you were answering
What
yet.
would you refer to?
Right. I don't know. They're asking. The delay in a few seconds makes it.
No, I understand.
the
You can go.
question.
You can go
Okay.
to the other question.
Now I'll
now.
go to the other question. You can come back to him. Okay, are you saying that the fact of experience itself is so staggering that its content is virtually, if not totally, irrelevant? And they further say this thing that's doing the experiencing is the infinite itself.
Well, yes, absolutely. But it's not that the content is irrelevant. It's that the content is not content. The content is not what you think it is, so it's not content. And the content itself reveals its own open-endedness. So in other words, any limited content that would be irrelevant doesn't actually exist because there is no limited content. All content is itself a direct display of unlimitation, a direct display of infinite dimensionality. Every flash of light that presents itself in your field of vision is completely infinite. You can't find where it begins, you can't find where it ends, you can't find its boundaries. All you can say is it's an aspect of this field, and you can't even say that meaningfully because you can't find an aspect and you can't find a field. But all of that is a way to begin to explore this astounding fact of the way phenomena are. Phenomena are not the way we think they are. They don't exist simply. They don't exist discretely. They don't exist in a way you can get a handle on. Even the most present, obvious, detailed experience is absolutely infinite. And I don't mean in some abstract sense. I mean it is immediately and experientially infinite in the sense that it's a presentation of information that is absolutely beyond coherent. Yeah.
The first questioner says, is experience sufficient designation for something that appears to be an intelligent universal entity? Closer.
It's an arbitrary designation. It's not a matter of being sufficient or not. It's not. I'm not defining it as experience. Again, I'm using this notion of experience as a device to try to indicate where to look for what we're talking about. What this is not limited by calling it experience or not, and if designating experience as an entity or not is irrelevant because experience alone is, and if there is an entity, then that's it. But you haven't added much. You haven't gained anything by calling it an entity or not. You don't gain anything by calling it you or not. It is certainly you. I mean, it's what the Advaitins and Ramana Maharshi meant by Atman, the self. They call this self-realization, and the self they're referring to is this actual presence of beingness that we're here indicating by experience. So sure, that's what you are. That is the entity that you are. But there is not really a you that's meaningfully findable. There's not really an entity that's meaningfully findable. There's just this. So why bother with all of those, all that nitpicking, all that, sort of splitting hairs?
You call it splitting hairs, but it's, at least to me, it seems like that those designations actually build this enormous world of a self that then causes all the problems of having
Right.
a self.
Sure. It builds it in your imagination.
Yes.
If you imagine it to
Right.
be true.
So, what they were talking about reminded me of part of the problem. I mean, well, let me just explain. It's like there's experience, and then there's like a feeling tone that follows that.
Sure.
And it seems that the me, or the development of a entity or person that is separate from the experience and is experiencing something, is based on feeling
sure.
tone.
Yeah, it may be, but again, all the feeling tone is just experience, and any me that exists is experience. So to designate this feeling tone as the basis for a me is all very well and good. Just like that feeling tone is the basis for a chair, and this feeling tone is the basis for a microphone. Yeah, sure, but there's but all that there is here is experience, and I can call it a microphone, and I can look at it as feeling tone and all that, and I haven't added anything, I haven't changed anything. It's still just experience. It's like I could stand at the beach and say, oh, look, there's that wave, and there's this part of that wave and that part of that wave, and there's this crest of that wave, and there's the body of the wave, and they're different from each other. I can say all that, but I haven't actually added anything to just the same thing that would be happening if I didn't say anything. See what I mean? In other words, the full field is present, even if I want to start designating apparent portions of it. I'm not actually splitting anything off. Right? I can go to the ocean and say there's this wave and there's that wave. I haven't actually split anything off. I haven't lifted these waves out and somehow separated them from the ocean. It's still just a damn ocean. And if I hadn't said anything, it would just be the ocean. If I didn't notice the waves, it would be the ocean. If I just closed my eyes and listened to it, it would be the ocean. And likewise, yeah, sure, there's feeling tone. Yeah, we got feeling tone for days. I mean, we got, how much feeling tone is there? Well, we're swimming in it. We're swimming in feeling tone. This is feeling tone, right? And is it the basis for anything? Well, it's the basis for being feeling tone, And if you want to argue the existence of things on the basis of feeling tone, you can feel free to, and God knows we've all done that, and we know what that's like. But we do that in our imagination. When you base some designation, some partiality on an experience, you're doing that abstracting in your imagination. You can't actually separate anything off, because your starting point is experience, and is inextricable from all experience. In other words, there's not this experience and that experience. You can't actually slice your experience up. It comes as a field.
Well, I'm positing that the feeling in itself creates the separateness. It seems to actually create a structure, a dimensional entity.
You can say in itself, but there's imagination in there.
Right. I mean,
and that comes with. I mean, imagination is not a separate thing. Imagination is an aspect of all this too.
It gives the imagination a dimension.
Sure. Sure. It's like free associating. It's like a Rorschach test. Ink blots. You look at or clouds. You look at the clouds and say, "Oh, that cloud looks like a Rolls Royce with a naked lady on the front." It's like, oh, and that cloud looks like another naked lady. Oh, that cloud looks like a naked lady.
It gives it physicality. It gives it physicality and solidity. It makes it seem as if it's real.
Because experience is real. Experience is real. It's the only reality. But, again, it doesn't come in pieces. It comes as a field. An infinitely dense field, an infinitely diverse field, but you can't pull parts out and hold them over here. I can't take this glass and take it outside of my experience and have it be a glass. I can't separate it. And when I'm experiencing this glass, I'm also experiencing what's right here.
So what do you think is involved in the process of imaginary separation?
Exactly that, imagination. Which is not just imagination. Imagination is an astoundingly powerful faculty. It's extremely intelligent and very, very powerful. And it's intrinsic to what this is, of course, obviously, since it's here, since it seems to be an effect, it obviously is an intrinsic aspect of this. Just like we were talking earlier, the ability to the spontaneous discrimination of intelligence within the field of experience also is here, and that's related to this imagination. But it's not that imagination is not here, it's not that imagination is not operating, it's that imagination doesn't actually create anything actual. You can imagine selves and bodies and others and politics and, heavens and hells, but you don't actually create anything by imagining them. What is what is, regardless of what you happen to be imagining or not. There is an objective reality, there is an objective condition, which is experience.
I just wanted to explore what we're calling, quote, imagination.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is actually going on when someone is imagining?
Well, that's the point. You can't say. It's infinite. You can't say what anything is. Imagination is no different. Imagination is a revelation of infinite dimensionality. How can you possibly get a handle on it?
Well, it seems to involve pictures. It seems to involve visual imagery.
It involves, it involves all kinds of aspects. It involves pictures, it involves discrimination, it involves abstraction, it involves memory, it involves all sorts of faculties. But saying that isn't really giving us much information because you can't say what any of those things are. So having designated them, having specified them, you still aren't any farther along in figuring out what's going on. Well, ultimately, it's completely mysterious.
Well, it helps to see how unconsciously it happens and that it is happening. And I mean, a lot of the times we're not even aware that that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's the point, is to notice that imagination happens. I mean, all these things, thought happens, right? Imagination happens. Abstraction happens. All emotion happens. All of these qualities that we're used to designating are actual, and since they're actual, they are observable, they are examinable. But having said that, when you observe them and when you examine them, you will discover that they are infinite, inconceivable, ungraspable, and there's no way you can wrap your head around them anyway. But you'll notice that they intrinsically are an aspect of this. They do not depart from this. They do not add anything to this. They do not subtract anything from this. So in other words, I could name everything that I can see in my field of vision, and I wouldn't have added anything to my experience. I could not name everything I can see, and I wouldn't have taken anything away from my experience. So this exercise of discrimination, this exercise of imagination and intelligence, doesn't actually change anything. I can make a list of everything I see, or I could not make a list of everything I see, and nothing is any different in actuality. I can call myself me, I can call myself a Buddha, I can call myself an arrogant asshole, I can call myself, how many different things could I call myself? The list is endless. And I haven't changed what I actually am by doing so. Right? I am what I am, and I'm not augmented or detracted from by what I call myself. Those are just fantasies. And likewise, this imagination, this designating and imagining things are certain things, doesn't make them so. And if I think it does, I'm a crazy person. And this is exactly what we're talking about, is the difference between insanity and sanity. Insanity is thinking the world actually is the way you think it is. Sanity is knowing that the world is the way it is, regardless of how you think it is. In other words, bowing to objectivity. There is an objective fact, and that fact is experience.
Okay, well.
They're in a holding pattern. We really stirred up a hornet's nest tonight.
I can witness the coming in of concept, of defining and naming who I am. And every single one of them are different. So I know I'm not any one of them.
Sure.
And yet, I see that arising all the time. It seems to me there's something more than that.
What do you mean by more than that?
Or is that, do you just see that process? I mean, I know I'm not.
Because it's not even a process, because you can't even say what it is, so you can't even say if it's a process. It's call it a phenomena.
I see that happening.
Sure. Yeah. You see what you see. That's experience. That's a perfect designation for the objectivity of experience. What you see, you see. You see thought, sure. Metaphorically, a synonym for experience. You see thought, sure. You see sensation, sure. You see abstraction, sure. You see believing, sure. You see imagination, sure. You see sensation, sure. All of these things that we can designate arbitrarily are actually present. But what they are is absolutely inconceivable. What's sensation? Yeah. No one knows what sensation is. I can designate it, I can recognize it, but I'm looking into infinity. I don't know what it is I'm looking at. I can't define it. I can't define thought. I can't define imagination. I can't define belief. I can see them because they are real. They are here. Right? They're mysterious, and they are this. They are this experience. And they are not, I can't authoritatively even separate them out. I can't say imagination is different than thought is different than sensation, because I don't know what any of them actually are. So I don't know if they're different or not. I don't know the relationship they have to each other, if any. If they're even there at all in any sense. I mean, all of those questions are like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. They're not addressable because you can't get a handle on the raw material itself of what you're trying to look at. Since you don't know what it is you're talking about, how can you talk about it with any authority? Right? I mean, we can talk about thought and belief and imagination and reality and sight and sound and sensation, but what are these things? They're self-evident, right? They're actual, right? I mean, it's undeniable that this experience is as it is, whatever, but you're kind of left there. I mean, you can't go any farther than that, and if you try to, you're just spouting bullshit. Because you can't say what anything, no one knows what anything is. You can't. But you don't need to know what it is, because it's not about defining, it's not about knowing, it's about participation. Yeah, we only have about 10 more minutes, so we should get these questions in.
I have a quick question. So, based on what you're saying tonight, experience is made up of actuality and imagination.
Well, it's made up of actuality, and imagination is actual, along with an arbitrarily other number of designatable things.
But the imagination, to me, is all of the discreteness that I see around me and the objectivity.
Yes.
And that, I mean, if I understand that correctly, is not real. It's unreal, because it's the labels that that I'm providing.
Yeah, it may be. There is infinite differentiation, we can say, within experience that is actual, right? I mean, what I experience as the color of the floor compared to the color of, this phone is clearly different, right? But that there is a phone that exists discretely different and other than the floor, I can't say. That's imagination. So you see, in other words, there is differentiation within experience, right? I can tell vision from thought, but I can't say what vision is or what thought is or what their relationship is. And if I think I can, that's fantasy. That kind of differentiation, that kind of a field of objects is imaginary. Mm-hmm. So in other words, there is differentiation, but when I think that differentiation implies actual discrete objects or something like that, that's where imagination kicks in. That's where belief kicks in. You follow?
And that's not real. That's not the real.
It's not actual. It's actual as an event. Of course, it's real in the sense that it's actually occurring, but it's not true in the sense that there are discrete objects that you can know that there's discrete objects. Let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying about investigating objectivity and objective reality and seeing more in that objective space, but I'm not able to do that. All that I can really do is just I feel this presence, and the presence is as close as I can get to moreness, but that isn't more.
But presence is objective reality. Presence is the totality of objective reality. If you can feel presence, that's objective reality.
And I can look at that chair and I can see boundaries and I can see discreteness, but I don't see moreness.
Well, there's, how many different ways can you look at that chair? How many different colors does that chair have? If you look at one little piece of it, another little piece of it, how much difference can you find? How much information is in that chair? That's where the moreness is.
Mm-hmm. But I can see the chair as presence. And
it is presence.
Maybe
Sure.
that's enough right there, just to see it
that's
as
great.
Presence.
Sure, presence is real. Presence is objectively true.
Mm-hmm.
Presence is reality. What I'm referring to as experience can also be referred to as presence. Absolutely, that is present, or just this presence, because that is present implies that there's a this. It's unnecessarily complicated. Yeah, okay. Presence is good. Presence is real good.
Okay, thank you.
Just as we have a bit of a queue, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And we're kind of coming into the finish line.
Okay.
We'll try and fit everyone in.
Okay. I'm trying to find the questions now. They've gone fast. Okay. The first person, several things they've said here. I don't mean me as ego or construct. I mean me as para-Brahman, Tao, experience, nothing, everything. It seems like a me to me. And I am what I am sounds very much like a me when you said.
Sure. You can say, yeah, sure, it's a me, but it's an it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need designating it as a me, designating it as para-Brahman, designating it as the Atman, designating it as Shiva, designating it as the universe doesn't doesn't add any information. I'm not saying. In other words, I'm not arguing. I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah, sure. It's what you actually are, but to say it's what you actually are is putting saying there's a you and an it and an actually and an is, and it's just, why not just say is? And why say, what you is, me is and it is unnecessarily complicated. Why not just say is? And then what it is, well, I can't say. It's certainly, there's no me other than it. There's no you other than it. There's no universe other than it. There's no para-Brahman other than it. There's no Shiva other than it. There's no devil other than it. So yeah, all those things are it, but that's unnecessarily elaboration. It just is.
Okay, the second questioner had another one. What does it mean to place value on content/drama and seek resolution to content?
What does it mean? It means hell. It means hell because you're lost in fantasy. You're chasing, you're trying to find solutions to problems that don't actually exist. So naturally the solutions don't exist, so you're screwed. All right, we're taking care of business here. We're checking them off.
It seems to me that what we've been talking about here is definitions. It's
Sure.
me, it seems to be, it's like this, I
Sure.
see the edges. Definitions are insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely pure and simple. Every time you define something, you're going into insanity.
Yeah.
You're losing your way.
Yes, exactly.
So, whenever I hear people say, it seems to me, it looks like, I experience is different, but what I've been hearing a lot is definitions.
Sure.
And
Yeah. What this is not definable. What this is not graspable. What this is not resolvable. Okay? So any kind of definition, resolution, certainty, separation, discrete definition, discrete, holding something to be something separate from something else is insanity in the sense that it is not true. It is not actual. Therefore, it is unactual. Therefore, it is unreal. Therefore, if you think it's true, you're nuts, to use a technical term.
thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things I thought I heard you say when you were talking with Irma a few minutes ago was something that using imagination was not a way in which you could get very far or move ahead or something.
Well, you can't get anywhere.
Right.
That's the problem with imagination is it's not actual. I mean, what you imagine to be the case is not actual. So it can't take you anywhere. You can't do anything with it other than fantasize.
Right. Well, I guess the question that I hit upon after hearing that was, so what is there that leads you further ahead getting anywhere?
Well, there is no anywhere to get, and there's no ahead to get, but what is actually present, what we're calling experience or isness or presence, since it is actual, it is enjoyable, and as enjoyable, it is nourishing, it is interesting, it is stimulating, it is involving. You can engage with it in actuality. And since what is there, you're actually engaging with something that is actual, it's not going to be frustrating and elusive and disappointing when you discover that it slipped through your hands.
Now, what you described there sounded pretty much as realization.
Of course. That's what we're talking about, realization.
Right.
Realization simply means engagement with what's real.
Right. And it doesn't involve any process of going from point A to point B exactly.
None whatsoever. It's just noticing what is actually the case, what has always been the case. And when you notice what's been the case, you also notice your fantasizing and all of that, and that's fine, because that's also the case. Mm-hmm. But you no longer are stuck in it or believing it to be objectively true. You're not subject to it. You're not trying to inhabit it. You may have built a castle in the clouds, but you're not trying to live in it.
Right, yeah. See, sometimes what happens to me during the course of these evenings, not all the time, but quite often, I get in a state of kind of like exhilaration or something like that.
Sure.
Without exactly realizing how that came about.
Sure.
I just notice, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So,
well, we explore a lot of ground here, and in the process of finding yourself drawn away perhaps from your usual way of relating to your experience, there can be a feeling of liberation, a feeling of excitement, a feeling of some kind of arousal, sort of, And that's great, sure, that because this is very vital. This is stimulating. It is nourishing. So it feels it. You feel it when you notice it. And typically we do this unconsciously or not, rationally or deliberately. And of course, these talks are designed, or at least intended. And designed is way too grandiose. So they're intended to indoctrinate or to suggest or to seduce or to indicate what this is that is valuable, that is available, which is nothing more than the actuality of your experience. And so if they have any efficacy at all, they will actually, to some extent, plug you into that more directly, which will certainly feel exhilarating.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
If definition is always untrue,
Yes.
can you find this through definition, or do you have to give up definition before you
No,
can
you
find
can
this?
find it through definition, because definition is untrue, but to the extent it exists at all, of course it is this, so it will reveal this. In other words, everything whatsoever reveals reality. So, of course, even insanity reveals reality. Even definition reveals reality.
But it's like, it seems...
But it's quicksand. It reveals it's flypaper. It reveals reality, but be careful.
Well, it seems to me that if you put a blindfold on somebody, they're never going to see what's going on. And it seems to me that the definition is a blindfold.
Well, it can tend to be. I mean, it's trying to find reality in definition is the hard way. I mean, there's an easy way and a hard way, and I'm always trying to indicate what I consider the easy way. And people come up with, well, but can't I look at the personality? Can't I look at the mechanism of identification? Can't I look at... Well, yeah, you can, but you're kind of, you're going to Oakland via Hong Kong. It's like, it's not necessarily the short and easy way. It's not what we call the quick path in the trade, the short path.
It might be the picturesque way.
It may well be. It no doubt will be. And we're all human beings are on the picturesque way, and what I'm offering is the shortcut. That's all. It's not necessarily the picturesque way, although it's not necessarily not picturesque. But I mean, by all means, yeah, getting lost in fantasy and delusion and insanity is picturesque as hell.
So
literally.
So meditation and standing on one leg and
all of it,
running marathons are all
sure.
valid ways.
Anything. There is nothing that is not a valid vehicle for discovering reality, because discovering reality is the only thing that's happening here, the only thing that has ever been happening here. And all of these methods that we're here defining insanity is just very roundabout ways of discovering reality. What I'm indicating is a more efficient shortcut, is all. So it's not necessarily better, it's just easier, but I'm lazy.
So this story, as I hear it, of the Buddha giving up before he finds it, is not necessarily part of the path. Giving up the search before he found awareness.
Well, he didn't actually give up the search. I mean, according to the story, Buddha said, wait a minute, all this spiritual stuff, screw it. I'm going to sit here and just get it. And I'm not going to move until I've got it. So that sounds like anything but giving up to me.
But he gave up the doctrine and he gave up the practice.
Yeah, which is what I'm recommending. I'm saying, hey, there's an easy way and a hard way, and have at it.
Thank you.
We have one more thing, computer. Then we're going to shut down.
This person was very excited. They said, they were talking about the meaning, the feeling of me, maybe the little me, if there is such a thing. And then he goes, there was the answer. So he says, thanks, Peter, you the man.
No, 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 you the man. Anyway, good night, everybody. I'm sorry we started late, and have a lovely whatever.